Morning, Joe Wenberg, Bluebird Semaphore. It's July 24th, I believe. Although it might be July 26th. Let's see. Yeah, probably July 26th. Friday, July 26th. And I'm more or less going to wrap up any remaining thoughts I might have on this book on Far East Asia by Paul Clyde. I've been talking about it a little bit on and off over a long period of time. It's one of those books that, because the pages are so thin, it's over 700 pages long, but the thickness of the book might lead you to believe it's less than over 700 pages. But it's quite an extensive amount of information in this book. And I've said it before, I like the way Clyde writes. It's Clyde, isn't it? Paul Clyde, yes. Anyway, I like the way he writes. And although I do have 2 small chapters left, I consider the book done. I'll read those, but we're like through the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, taking over China. I think you could put a date of 1950 on that. Mao Tse-tung had been planning this since the 1920s. So, a lesson to be learned: if you're planning a revolution and want to take over a country, a civilization, start early, end late. Okay? He planned this over 30 years. Now, and there's nothing special about Mao Tse-tung. He was no great shakes, as they say. He was just a person who found himself the opportunity to take advantage of lots of people and put himself in power. No great shakes. Anybody could have, in the same spot in history, could have done the same thing. Why in God's name they would want to, be the leader of an action that's going to kill millions of people and turn a vast region into a garbage heap? I have no idea. Why you would want to do that is beyond me. But he did, and he'll claim that the people were starving and they were downtrodden, and he was going to pick them up. Sure, he picked them up by killing them. That's how the dictators do it. We'll pick up the peeps, we'll kill them. So they're not down anymore, they're not up, but they're not down. So we fixed them. We kill all of them. So he's very successful at killing his people. That's Mao Tse-tung. But, once he was gone, the people washed their hands of him. As far as I could tell, any reverence they had for him was gone. Now, getting back to the book, lots of things I could pick on and talk about. There's a fellow, I believe it's Hu Shi, H-U, and then S-H-I-H, Hu Shi. He's like a major philosopher. But the system, made sure they put a sock in his mouth and shut him up. And he did an awful lot during his lifetime. He was president of Peking University. He studied at Cornell. He got professorships. He was a lecturer. He did lots of things. He wrote books. He championed and was successful at championing getting Chinese literature to be less written in classical Chinese and more in the writing styles of the ordinary people. He was successful at that. He was quite the man, and thank God for him. He wound up living in Taiwan, because if he had stayed on the mainland, he would have been executed. And those people didn't execute lightly; they executed savagely. So he's lucky. First of all, he's lucky he got himself. First, he was exiled into the United States. But before that, as a young man, he was going to Cornell University. Now, I don't think that was the period of his exile. That came later. And right now, if you go to Cornell, there's an actual hall, residence, named for this man. And now, I say a residence. It could just be a hall with facilities for study of Chinese culture. I don't know. But what I'm saying is that this man totally ignored by world history, because if there's anything the world powers like to do, they like to fall in step with what China is ordering. Step by step, they follow the Chinese leadership. Now, if you read this book, you may come up with the same insight that I did, that it is more or less a blueprint for how countries, nations change their political and social structure. Pretty much a blueprint. And as I was reading it, I kept saying to myself, boy, this is going on right here. Boy, this is happening everywhere in the world. Everywhere in the world is doing the same thing China was doing for 30 years, from 1920 to 1950. And if anything, it's been getting more and more so. So, and it's quite upsetting, and because these people don't fool around. These Chinese communists, they don't fool around. They're going to get you, they're going to wrap their hands around you, and they're going to execute you. That's what they do. Now, Xi has a wonderful analysis, a summing up, of their tactic. They don't only demand that you adhere to their philosophy, you practice it, you mouth it. They demand that you cannot be silent. You must participate in their debate. So if you're fat, dumb, and happy living somewhere on the planet and you see no reason to involve yourself with the ridiculousness that passes for leadership and government, and you prefer to sit on the fence and just watch the shenanigans. In a Chinese state, you can't do that. You have to participate. And I'm getting all of this from the book. I'm not just, shouting this out of my head. This is all you will distill all of it from this book. Like I said, it's kind of like a blueprint for how to build a communist state. Now, they demand you not be silent and that you participate. This means that you'll be going to adult schools at night, when you get home from work. You can't go pop on a tube and watch your favorite show. Now you gotta go get indoctrinated. That's what they like to do. They like to indoctrinate you. And the they do this perhaps in a way that could be considered almost invisible, almost going on without the knowledge of the people that it's happening to. Because these social revolutions, they don't happen in one day, they happen over a long period of time. And this creep, in other words, it creeps up on you, and one day you find yourself, you're a communist. You know, like so many people in the governments of so many countries in this world that used to and still like to believe the fraud that they're democracies, that they're really champions of communism. And, you know, undoubtedly, they're doing, like I said, the blueprint that you'll get from this book. All you got to do is read it, and you'll say, oh, my goodness, this is exactly what's happening all over the world today. So I consider it an important book for people to read who are interested. But, of course, we can say right now that most people aren't interested. They're not interested, that their freedom is being taken away from them. For the most part, it already has been taken away, you know. But that's the way of the world. I don't know who was it had a song back in the hippies days about freedom's just another word, nothing left to lose. Well, you know, you want to read into contemporary music, ideological platforms, go right ahead. I prefer to be a little more critical with my thinking than to follow along, tapping my foot to a rock and roll song. Like I said, this guy, Hugh Shi, was fortunate he didn't reside in mainland China, but instead he resided in Taiwan. Now, he wasn't always in Taiwan, but he was there. He lived there probably a good deal of his life, and at the end of his life, that's where he was. The the historians have tended to disregard him, even though he was a mainstream Western thinker, philosopher, mainstream. He was pals with Dewey, who was a big creator of a large segment of Western philosophy. He was buddies with him. He was a man highly regarded in his day until he no longer could be tolerated by the Chinese. They had it up to here with him and his statements of support for Chinese history and what it was and how it evolved. He outlined his histories from the time frame of the warring states, I believe, which is essentially that he disregards a lot of what went on before that, as a lot of more like legends and unreliable information. But then going forward, in the dynasties that precipitated out of the activities in China, from what I'm understanding by reading these books, he does valid analysis of those histories, and that's something the Chinese didn't like. The Chinese communists, they wanted to wipe that all out. They wiped out Confucius. They wiped out any thought systems that started with Confucius and came after him, wiping all that out because it was their favorite thing to do, and they will do it continuously now and in the future. When they get a people they want to take over and change them into communists, the first thing they do is they turn them upside down and empty their heads. Their heads have to be empty so they'll be gullible enough to devour the hypocrisy of people like Marx and Lenin, Mao, Stalin. You got to empty their heads first, because their heads have the teaching of Confucius still in their head, or the concept of the Son of Heaven, and the concept of empires. They're not going to absorb Marx and Lenin and Mao and Stalin. They need an empty head, and that's what the Chinese will do first to any group of people they're looking to take over. They stand them upside down. If you remember, another group of people will turn people upside down and empty their wallets, their pockets. But the communists, they turn you upside down and they empty your head. So when you see early pictures of them, they look like zombies walking around in the cities and the towns, without a clue of what they're doing. Because at that point, their heads are empty. Then they had to go be indoctrinated about all the refined living in communistic fashion. How wonderful that is. And so they create the CCP, which is China's Communist Party, and then Mao, he thinks of himself now as taking the place of the human living on Earth, who's the link with the gods. He's now a god-like being to his people. And this is all from a nobody, a person who came from nothing, basically a peasant in the south of China. I'm pretty sure it was. It's from a nobody. He's making himself the son of God. And it's such ridiculous crap. But interestingly enough, his second in command there, Zhou Enlai, he was from a prominent family, well educated. I think he got some education at least in the United States, and he stuck by Mao's side for the whole time. He was there to greet Nixon. How more in could you get? But it always amazed me, because I truly always believed, that Zhou Enlai saw the lie of Mao and his communists, but he was just wise enough to keep his mouth shut and reap the benefits of being on the top of the world, so to speak. Anyway, he did what he did. Now, this method of bringing people to assimilate themselves to a Chinese, not a Chinese, but a communist philosophy. And Zhou Enlai, who really should essentially be thought of as a serious thinker, goes along with it. It just shows you that even the top bureaucrats over there, they're all fearful for their lives. They probably still are, but he what did he do? Zhou Enlai. I don't know. I don't think the world would be seriously deficient if he hadn't come on the scene. I mean, really, what did he do but go along with anything that Mao wanted? So, Paul Reed gives you a blueprint for what went on in the Far East from 1920 to 1950. If you want to know how the world got to where it is, this is one of the books you got to read. And quite frankly, the world is not in a good place. It just isn't. Not that it has been for a very long time, been in a good place. As a matter of fact, you can make the argument that the world and its societies have never been in a good place. I mean, the history of human warfare goes back multiple thousands of years. So, if human societies do warfare, and I'm saying this is like 4,000 years at least, coordinated, thought out, planned warfare for 4, 5, 6,000 years, then you can't say that the world has been in a good place for anything that we might call the recent past. And before that, you couldn't say it either, because the lives that people were living were so filled with destitute. It was bitter cold. There was horrible animals and horrible conditions of living. There was ignorance. Just nothing to give a thumbs up to human life on this planet for as long as you could think. So to say that the world right now is in a bad place, well, the world has always been in a bad place for a very, very long time. Since the molten metals and other materials started to cool down and water formed on the surface of the earth. And the first little amoeba crawled out of the brine. Now, we've been in an awful situation for a long time. And I don't know where, but recently I've been getting a very, very bright picture. I think it was a documentary enabled something about the economy. Oh yeah, Easy Money, a fairly long documentary on what transpired. Mostly since 2008, the first financial crisis in modern times, 2008, the bottom almost dropped out, stock market plunged, and everybody went scrambling to the hills. But that documentary made it very, very clear to me how the structure of the monetary systems that we have favors such a tiny, tiny percent of the population. This documentary went as far as to say, once again, this was in a documentary entitled Easy Money. It went as far as to say that the only people that benefited from the catastrophe that took place, I want to say 2020, 2018, I don't know, that particular drop in the stock market, a tiny percentage, not 0.01, but 0.0, some fraction, 0.05, say, which is bigger than 0.01, I think. But it's such a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the social structure did not get abused by that decline in the stock market. They were and always will be protected. Their financial status is and always will be protected. They are not going to get hurt in any downturn, either now or in the future, because of the way the financial system is structured. Everybody else will be hurt, no doubt about it. And the people at the bottom of the heap, of course, they get hurt the worst. And there's nobody really caring about it. Basically, it's because the way the system is set up. The system is set up to ensure that those people in that tiny, tiny, slivery slice of the social structure cannot get hurt. Cannot get hurt. So even though the stock market crashes, even though the government agencies are doing this and doing that, that tiny sliver, they keep going on doing the same old thing they've always done. They keep doing it because there's money to be made no matter what's happening in the stock market. And that's what I was able to glean from actually watching, for the most part, that whole documentary on Easy Money. Easy money meaning the government was throwing it out there. You know, hey bank, here's another $1 trillion for you. Here's another trillion. Go do what you want. And what did they do? They went around and they did exactly the same things that got the whole system in the mess to begin with. So if you think there's a light at the end of the tunnel for us, think again. This garbage is going to go on forever. All right? Because it's been permanently sliced into and wedged into our social structure. The only thing you can wish for is that you were actually part of that tiny, 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 tiny slice at the very top, and that you were going to have your billions and billions and billions of dollars no matter what happens. That's the only thing you can wish for. But you might as well wish for Dixie. You know, and these contemporary politicians, you know, they're so ruthless. They'll tell you anything. They'll tell you anything to make you believe that things are looking good. They're looking up. Don't you worry now. We got you covered. You want to find out about the hypocrisy of that, read this book. Read this book. The Far East Paul Cly. And not only will you know what went on in the Far East between 1920 and 1930, but you'll know a lot more. And I highly recommend it. It's a slice of world history that, generally speaking, is not looked at by the Western world. Oh no, God forbid we should look outside the box. God forbid we should take our heads out of the sand. God forbid we should do nothing but rollick around looking for a low price on a tour guide, on a cruise line, you know. Let's get that low price for the cruise. Come on. Oh, did you hear? Patty down the road, she got it for $680. All inclusive. Oh, yeah. I want to be like Patty down the road. Listen. Try to find a tiny, quiet piece where you can live in isolation from the nonsense. And if you do that, just try to make it work as best you can. Oh, and by the way, my paintings will be on display at the Wheaton Art Center in South Jersey, actually in Millville. Now, if you know about the art scene in South Jersey, let me tell you a few things. First of all, this is the epicenter of the glass-making industry in the United States. Some dude came over from Europe in the 1700s, and when he was in Europe, he was a glassmaker, came over here in and around the Delaware Valley, crossed from Philadelphia, and he saw that the ingredients were here to have a good glass industry. We had sand, we had plenty of wood for fires and so on and so forth, water to cool the mills, whatever they needed, they had it. So he went over back to Europe, brought back some glass technicians, and he started up the glass industry. Basically, one of the very first types of glass they were making was plate glass for windows. You know, everybody thinks of the glass industry in South Florida, and right away they're getting carried away with art glass. Look at this. Oh, yeah, we got the art glass. Well, yes, they do have very nice art glass, but that's not how it got started. And when you read about that industry, you always read the delightful, happy story about how these workers, after a hard day in the glass factory, would stay a little longer, and with the excess glass, they would make articles commonly referred to as fancy glass. Quite nice, little doodads, and became quite, and still probably is, a very collectible piece of the art world. And so that's where I'll be on this weekend, the Wheaton Art Center. I'll be outdoors. Indoors will be pretty much the museum. And they have these type of things a couple of times a year, particularly indoors. And I was there recently and I saw their art glass exhibit in that section, made up as a museum. And, the stuff is spectacular. However, let it be known, my objection to this to me, just such a blunder by civilization to always segregate the art so that the most the masses can do can walk into a room and see art behind some glass panel. They can't get in close and get a warm and fuzzy. They can't. And everybody will tell you, wow, if you had everybody getting free access, they would all destroy it. We couldn't preserve our great history of art. Well, listen, art without human interaction ain't art. And if you don't believe me, here's Carl Sandburg. He'll tell you. You know, but who's Carl Sandburg? Totally out of favor. He's not anybody that they're talking about anymore these days. You know, only thing they talk about are people that are hung up on dope or something. That's the guys who make it big now. You know, big dope. We should refer to the to this age as the big dope. You know, you had the age of, what did they have? Age of, I don't know, a bunch of ages. And so now we'll have the big dope age. You know, you go to college, the college president is in his secretive office smoking dope, you know, or popping back a few Quaaludes. I don't even know what they are. But listen, you know, art should be something that's touched by the people. I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the primitive times, they would make art and they would be used in their ceremonies and their sacrifices or whatever they did. And, you know, everybody got to touch them. By the way, on that note, let me show you a piece I picked up recently, which I think is that sort of dealy. You may not think so, but it doesn't matter. So I picked this up recently. I have no idea how it got into my hands other than somebody had it and then I had it. But look at this. See, you know, one of the things that's cool about it, if you put a light behind it, oh yeah, here we go. The eyes will shine up. Check this out. See? See that? Very neat, huh? So we don't know what it is. I'm speculating it was used some sort of religious totem in South America. That's what I'm speculating. But I don't know. All I know is I liked it. It's wood. Never seen exactly that kind of setup for teeth. See that? It's very nice. Very, very nice. Yes. And I also recently came across stuff that I've been looking for years. Ever since I read Prairie Earth, I came across this which is a piece of flint. See this? Flint. And this is such a sharp edge, boy, let me tell you. This is what they were napping. As a matter of fact, you would suggest that some primitive type had napped this and made a blade. Okay, very hard stuff. And when they were napping and the sparks were coming out, the primitives thought that the fire, those sparks were in the stone. And what they were doing was releasing. I got another smaller piece of the flint. And I got hopped up on flint after reading Prairie Earth. I think I've mentioned Prairie Earth in some prior discussion. Forget who the author is. Let me see, I could do a quick look up. Very quick. Go to the magic box. He's got a weird, well, his pen name is a little weird. Yeah, his Prairie Earth Fellas, the author's pen name, Least Heat Moon. William Least Heat Moon. Yeah. Another book, highly recommended, perhaps more so than Far East Asia. Highly recommended. And although there are certainly two on anybody's must-read list. I mean, I don't know how you can consider yourself a human being if you didn't read those two, you know. But some people are more concerned with, things of less serious or less meaningful things that would seem to have less meaning for us humans. Because most of the entertainment that's done in this world is done to satisfy the biological urges of humans. And if any non-humans are listening or paying attention, for them too. I mean, it's a one-to-one relationship between the constant pounding and beating of contemporary music and biological organs such as the heartbeat. The heart is beat. Boom, 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 ba, 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 boom, 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 ba, 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 boom, 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 ba, 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 boom, boom, boom. So that's what you got. That's what you got. On the other hand, if you're doing things with your free time, such as paying attention to William, what was his name? William Moon Heatleast or whatever, or Paul Clyde in the Far East Asia. You're not, your biological systems are not doing that. They're trying to follow in the footsteps of those authors what they themselves were thinking. Now, with music, when you get into classical music, although yes, they're keeping time, but they're not pounding it into you. They're not. And by the way, for whatever reason, I found it necessary yesterday to listen to one of my all-time favorites in the classical world, and that was Schubert's String Quartet, number 13 in A minor. And if you haven't heard that yet, you haven't lived. You have to hear Schubert's String Quartet, number 13 in A minor. And if you haven't heard that, you haven't lived yet. And I give that particular piece by Schubert very high marks, extremely high. But you know what? The classical genre is flooded with wonderful music like that. And to call it music, I think, is to do it a disservice. Because all of that stuff is beyond music. All of that stuff is essentially the essence of what can be glorious about our spiritual interpretation of the world. All of that stuff. And like I say, to call it mere music is doing it a disservice. It actually brings it to a lower class of materialism, a much lower class. It's really undefinable. Now, I've been listening to classical music at least for 50 years, if not more. But early on, as with any new entry into classical music, by that I mean a person newly discovering the world of listening to classical music, one of the things that will get thrown at you over and over will be Vivaldi's Four Seasons. And when I was in that situation, I could never tire of saying, this guy Vivaldi, he had a connection with the heavens. He was hooked up. He had a pipe right into those harmonies of the universe. Hooked up. Vivaldi. And I used to listen to them over and over. And having been in that mode for maybe 5 years, my brother and his son were probably trying to poke fun at me because, whenever the topic of music came up, there would be the name of some contemporary guy that people were going to, where do they go to? Concerts, by the tens of thousands. And they would talk about that. And the only thing I had was, the classical stuff. So they said, "Oh, Joe, you know a lot about this. Here, we got this album. It's one of Vivaldi's Four Seasons. I'm going to play one, see if you know which one it is." So they put it on, and now that's a little tricky. There are four of them, and a lot of them start out the same, or they have a lot of the same mode in it. So he puts it on, and after a while, I said, "I'm going to have to make a stab at this." And I said winter, and it was right. And that was it. They never questioned my abilities with classical music again after that. That's something similar, and I'm not suggesting that I'm in any way, and you know this, in a sphere of human types as Winston Churchill, but from what I understand, when he was in school, he knew that on the examination, he would be asked to draw a map of one of their British Empire colonies. What else? But so he said, "Well, I can't learn all of these in the small time that I have. I'm going to pick one." He picked New Zealand. From what I'm told and what I read, I don't know, but and that's the one that was on the exam, New Zealand. So he aced it. So every now and then you have to get lucky when it comes to this knowing business. Because as I always say, you can't know everything. Well, you can almost know everything. You can't know everything, It'd be pretty difficult. Hey, I think I should wrap this up. Once again, Far East Asia, communist. We look at these contemporary pictures of millions and hundreds of millions of people flooding the streets of China. Hey, they look like the people flooding the streets of any other modern city in any other country. That's what they look like. But guess what? They're not. Because at one time or other, either they or the people that came before them, what do you call them? Their fathers, their mothers, their uncles, at some point in time, their family members of the past had themselves turned over and had their minds empty. And then those people went out and educated their children. Those people became the professors. You can't call them professors. They're not professing anything. They got nothing in their heads. But they went out and made the contemporary population, which we see, crowding up the streets in China when we see films about China. So don't get taken in by that. That say, "Oh, look, it looked like every other city. Look." No, don't get taken in by that. You're looking at millions of empty heads simply ambulating through a street, trying to get out of the way of traffic, looking at the big dizzying billboard signs flashing away a mile a minute, you know? No, they're empty heads with a biological attachment to the universe. That's all they are. So that being said, I'm going to close. Don't forget, read Far East Asia. If you get a chance, look into Prairie Earth. Somebody, Moon, something. Okay? And if I tell you that a book is worth reading, you know it's worth reading. Okay? Here we go.